All righty. So we're going to go on and get started. Thank you so very much for tuning in, for joining this evening. Um, and wonderful. My name is Dr. Christine Cosby Gaither, and I am the All righty. And executive So we're going to go on and get started. Thank you so very much for tuning in, for joining this evening. So, okay. There was there's always, of course, technical issues, and I anticipate those. So we're gonna be okay with that. Okay. All right. So we're going to get started. And I'm very excited about this evening because we have really a panel that's going to be jumping in with us. And these are some persons who are stroke survivors. So I'm excited about that. And I'm excited to talk to them because, one of the things is, and as a stroke survivor, I will say this is a process that's not all, of course, this is never easy, but it's always good to know that you have someone there that can kind of understand your journey and kind of understand what's been going on and how you're feeling, and they actually understand. So I am so grateful for these three survivors we're going to be talking to tonight because they have encouraged me in words in ways that shoot, I can hardly imagine. So, but before we get started, once again, my name is Dr. Christine Cosby Gaither. I am the founder and executive director of A Stroke of Grace. And thank you for choosing to spend this time with us, whether I don't know where you're located from, but this is going to be very interactive. Please feel free to use the chat if you're on YouTube, if you're on Zoom with us. Please feel free to use the chat and engage with us, engage in the conversation with us. And I really wanted to do this because May is Stroke Awareness Month. I don't know if many of you know, I know May is also known for Mental Health Awareness Month. And, but I really, really am passionate about, of course, stroke awareness and stroke prevention. So I wanted to make sure and do something for Stroke Awareness Month. So, and I will say, strokes don't always look the way that people expect them to look. So I wanted to give another picture of exactly, kind of what stroke looks like, what some of those warning signs are, because, and we'll talk about and hit on this a little more later throughout this evening, but strokes are 80% preventable. So, but you need to be educated of what to know and what to look for in those warning signs. So therefore, you can prevent that from not only for help to prevent one for your family and then also for yourself. So tonight, and we're gonna break up this evening into three parts. We have three wonderful panelists, and also we're gonna break this into three parts. And we're gonna focus on, first of all, how to recognize a stroke. We're going to talk about the BEFAST method. It is a method that I really, really want you to learn from and really try to memorize and put in your head, because this is the way that we are going to get educated about this. So therefore, we can do more in our prevention work. In addition to that, we're going to talk about the different symptoms that get overlooked, because sometimes strokes look different in every person. So what might look like a stroke textbook wise may not be the actual symptoms that you actually experience. So we're going to go through and we're going to talk tonight also about some of the symptoms that often get overlooked, and especially in women and young people, young adults. Like I said, I'm a stroke survivor, and I was 35 years old when I suffered my stroke. And the things that I went through is something that maybe someone who is 82 may not have experienced. So we're going to talk a little bit about that also. And then we're going to talk about what we can do starting now to reduce our stroke risk. There's things that we can start doing right this very second. And after each teaching segment, you're going to teach for a little second, and then you're going to hear, like I said, from a real story from one of our survivors, someone who's actually survived a stroke, and is someone who is still here to inspire others. So guess what? Let's jump in. Let's get started. So, and hi, Robin. Hi, everyone. And thank you so very much for being here once again. I appreciate that. And so let's get started. So let's start with the urgent most part of stroke education. And this is something that I always teach on, I always talk about, and that is recognizing the actual signs and symptoms and how to recognize them so you can look at them, you can have them early. So one of the simplest and most effective tools is something that is known as the BEFAST model. BEFAST. BEFAST is an acronym. And if you are in the chat, because I want you to engage with us in the chat, so make sure that you put in the chat BEFAST, type BEFAST. If you are familiar and you are ready to go, we're going to go through this. And it's BEFAST, BEFAST, BEFAST. Okay, so B is for balance, and your balance is sudden loss of coordination. All of a sudden, you're walking, and then you don't have coordination. You can't figure out where exactly center is when you're walking. So B is for balance. E is for eyes, and it is for eyes. And I will tell you, this is sudden vision changes. So if you have any sudden vision changes, double vision, if you experience some type of all of a sudden, either you go blind in one eye or even in both eyes. So yeah, so it could be one or both eyes. So I will tell you, when I suffered my stroke, that was the biggest thing that I had. I had issues in my left eye. My right eye is a lot stronger than my left eye. So a lot of times when I'm looking into things and when I'm viewing things, I have to close my left eye, my weak eye, in order to really truly see. Now, I try my best to close my right eye to strengthen my left eye, but that is one of the symptoms. I did not have these issues prior to my stroke. So now that is a symptom I'm very well aware of because it affected me. My eyes affected me. F stands for face, facial drooping, unevenness in your face. Or like say, for example, if one side of your face, when you go to smile, if one side of your face, your jaw, when you smile, it's not even, it's not symmetrical. Every one part is higher than the other. So you want to make sure and look for that. Also to think about numbness. So I know we talked about things that we don't necessarily always see, but numbness is, of course, is something that you don't always see, but it is something that you could definitely, that could be a symptom of this. A is for arm weakness. Weakness or numbness in one arm. So let's just say, you try to go to raise both of your arms up, but one of your arms, you just can't quite make it. The up one arm, you can make it, but then the other arm, you just can't raise it to the same level as the other arm. So that is a sign. You want to make sure your arms are. S stands for speech difficulty. Speech difficulty, difficulty speaking, slurred speech, or inability to speak. A lot of times that you might think that you are talking and you're talking fluently, everything is flowing well, but everything that's coming out of your mouth is gibberish. The people who are around you do not understand what you're saying. They're looking at you like confused because they know something is wrong because you're speaking gibberish right now. And then finally, T stands for time. Time to call 911. Time to call your local emergency, because depending on where you are in different places, in different states, they actually, believe it or not, I've learned this, they don't use 911. So your local emergency number, whatever that number is, time to call them, because timing is everything. And I want to stress that every second counts. Every second counts. And brain, we always say in the stroke world, we say time is brain, because literally the brain loses nearly 2 million neurons per minute during a stroke. So everything is time. You have to be on time. Timing is everything. And that's why delays, they can lead to long-term disability or death. Unfortunately, death. And I want to give you a real world example of some things that recently I speak to different survivors almost daily, unfortunately. But I spoke to the wife of a survivor. And when she started talking to me about her story and talking to me about her husband and how he suffered a stroke, she talked to me about some different things that she saw seeing before he actually suffered the stroke that were kind of warning signs. And one of those things where she felt as if when they went out to dinner, the evening before his stroke, when they went out to dinner, she said that his smile was uneven. She said that, but it never dawned on her because she was unaware of the signs that that could have been something that was about to lead to something else. She thought that it was just something that just happened that one time, it would go away. But she never even noticed that. So in our community, I will say strokes are more likely to be fatal and disabling because of delayed care. Timing is everything. And yes, strokes affect Black men and they affect women differently, Black women differently. And we must be alert and ready to act. So first, I'm gonna do, and Ben, I think you're on here. Thank you so very much. I appreciate that. So Ben, I'm gonna bring you up. You are a stroke survivor, and I want everyone to please welcome Ben, Benjamin Kirk, who's a stroke survivor, and he's going to use. I'm so happy for him because he's using his experience. He's always been willing to do so, but he's using his experience to help others. So Ben, hey, how you doing?
I'm all right, Dr. Cosby.
Good,
I'm
good, good. So
excited to be here.
yeah, thank you so very much for being here. We appreciate that. So let me ask. So first of all, when did you suffer your stroke? What date was your stroke?
It was September of 2007.
September of 2007. Tell us a
Yeah.
little bit about your story. What exactly happened with your stroke?
Well, it's interesting. Some of the signs and things that you were talking about and explain people that people have before a stroke, it brings back to my remembrance a lot of things that did happen to me because I did not recognize anything. Um, I remember the experience of being at work and I felt somewhat fine. I didn't feel bad, but I was trying to write a receipt out for somebody, and I couldn't write the receipt. My arm just wouldn't write, and that lasted for maybe 30 minutes or so, and then I was fine. Never thought about something was wrong. I went to choir rehearsal for regular rehearsal. I taught the music and people would comment they didn't understand what I said. And one friend said, "Why is your face twisted?" And I'm like, "Oh, because I didn't feel anything. I did not, I wasn't aware of any kind of illnesses. Nobody that I knew had had a stroke before. We did not have strokes in my family. Um, they didn't talk about the history. And so I just kind of played it off. Um, and I remember the week that I had the stroke, I was at church and we had finished a revival. I went up to go say goodnight to my pastor because I just wanted to go home and lay down. That was that day I didn't really feel very good. I couldn't say what it was, but I just wanted to go home. And as I said goodnight to my pastor, he turned around because, as he said, he thought I was slurring the words. He said, "I thought you were drunk because I didn't understand a thing you were saying." And as he was going out the door, this is sometimes, I guess, the way that we do as men. Trying to get me to stop to get some help. I kept going and just wanted to go home and lay down. I just wanted to lay down. And I guess the thing that stopped me, I know the thing that stopped me was he said, "Benjamin Kirk, you are being disobedient to your pastor." And that stopped me cold at the back door. And he had a church nurse take me to the hospital. And as I got to the hospital, I started feeling a little bit worse. And when I got in the emergency room, they took my blood pressure and immediately took me into the back. I remember seeing the blood pressure machine saying 295 over 145, unless I was hallucinating. And the nurse gave me a shot, and it kind of allowed some things to go through. I guess I don't know the medical terms, but I just was going out after that. Um, I had difficulty walking, speaking, or writing at all for about 3, 4 weeks solid after that. And I did not, at that time, I didn't have insurance, so I did not get any therapy or any uh, help. Or I just had some very good friends, some very good church members that sort of helped me with my speech, because that would that made me an emotional, not being able to know what was wrong with me. Besides, I had a stroke, and not having any support, it just kind of left me out there.
Mm.
So, and I've just had the journey of trying to rebuild myself since that time. I did not, a lot of people say when you have a stroke, you immediately try to file disability and so forth and all that. And I tried to go back to work. I didn't understand it. When I felt better, I tried to go back to work, but I couldn't fill out applications. I couldn't take tests anymore. And I not understanding it, it became a really emotional roller coaster for me, because nobody sat down with me and said, this is going to be what's happening to you. This is what has happened to you, and this is your life now. And so it was a year and some months, and I finally broke down and went to the Social Security office. And I walked through the door. This is how good God has been to me. I got to say that. And I broke down crying. And the clerk that came from behind the counter was a Social Security worker. And she had come back to work. That was her first day after being off for 2 years after having a stroke. And she was there. And I fell into her arms crying like a baby. And I will remember that was in November when I first went in there. And I went through the process, and all that. And I wasn't expecting much, you know what I mean? But I went through the tests, and they found out. I applied in November and got my first disability check in February. So God was good, because I always heard about horror stories and everything, but I did go. So that's kind of my story up to now.
Wow, thank you so very. And when was the stroke again? When was the
September 2008. It was 2 months before I was to graduate from Indiana Wesleyan University with a bachelor's degree in business administration, marketing, and supervision, with a minor of interior, because I already had an interior business. And I had a store in Kokomo, Indiana. And after that, it just, I lost the schooling. It just, I don't know. It just lost. I was just, that's the only word I can use. I still have trouble with vocabulary sometimes. And I think that per se, I will take fault for that, because I need to do a little bit better of self-care as far as exercising and doing things, because I need to concentrate on help to myself to rebuild. So,
Yes, well, thank you so very much for sharing your story with us. And yes, I know this is this is a journey. It's not something that happens overnight. This is a journey. It's something that, man, it's years and years into this. It's your new normal, right?
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and
Can
one
I,
of Yeah, go ahead.
man, I just wanted to add this something. This is something really that has just kind of come to front for me here lately in the past maybe 2 years. But I have dealt with depression almost every single day and year since I've had that stroke, and have never dealt with it. And I mean, I've been in some very, I don't say suicidal, but it's just a depressed mood, because of the way my brain functions on not being able to go ahead, get ahead, things like that. And until I started so I started working on it. I have started working on it, and that entails physical, movement and doing things a little bit better and thought. But one thing that we don't think about, because depression is an emotion, and emotions come on before we know it or before we understand it. and especially blacks, men especially, depression, it can be a bad thing, a very heavy thing, especially if it's not shared, and or if you don't get help, or if you don't have a outlet or a way to get more understanding about what's going on with you besides the stroke. So I just want to throw that in there for somebody. If they, depression keeps you still,
Mm.
and it stops all motivation. You stop, and that the stroke already tries to limit you, but depression just is like icing on the downward cake. You just don't feel like fighting through it, or you just don't feel like the extra what it would take to fill out an application or to sign up for school, or it's just you just get isolated, and you get by yourself, and you just, if you're not careful, you'll whittle away.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah, well, thank you so very much for sharing. And yes, we need to do that's a whole another thing just about depression and mental illness. That is, I mean, that's huge. Because I would tell you personally, I understand because I was there, and depression is it's odd, it's weird because
Mm-hmm.
remember your life prior to the stroke and you remember how your mindset was and you weren't maybe not in that position, but now you've had this event to happen to you and now you find yourself in this depression and it's very weird. And I now truthfully I will say that I agree with you. I understand that depression is real. Depression is really real. I never understood that really now, but it's real. And thank you so very much for sharing your story. I appreciate that. Now, I know some of the things, I know we're talking about the warning signs of stroke, and you did mention a couple that you had. You said you had excuse me, slurred speech. And sometimes I have to even slow down because I'm going to trip over my words also. So I have to be conscious enough to be able to speak, slow down and speak. Um, so yes, you mentioned slurred speech, but what were some of the other warning signs? What were some of the other signs that you had? I know you said something about your writing.
Yeah, I couldn't, the control of my arm. I couldn't write down uh, anything. I couldn't control my arm. Um, I worked with cash then, and I couldn't count properly. I would have to do, and it would go and come, that for the morning, when I checked in my drawer or something like that, everything was fine. But by the time the afternoon came and I needed to check in another employee, I would have be like, how come I can't add this up? Why can't I get it in my head? And um,
Mm.
I don't really know of any other. I didn't have a headache, and the slurring of my speech and the my face, even though others saw it, I didn't feel it or I didn't know it. And they would say something that was just something that. So probably a lot of my thought process was.
Yeah. And I will say, thanks for sharing that. And one, because I'm just thinking, we have an audience that's watching us on YouTube also. And what do you want, just out of curiosity, the people who are watching us, whether you are on Zoom or you are on YouTube watching us, but what do you want our audience to know about acting fast, about not waiting? About what did you learn in that when your pastor told you that you need to be obedient and allow someone to take you to the hospital?
Yeah. One, be aware of yourself. I mean, like I said, when I couldn't write, I should have known something was wrong. I mean, I guess that's just ignorance of education for as health goes. But I should have known. Be smart and pay attention. You know your body. If some things are seem like weird, especially if they happen more than once, don't wait for a third time. I was blessed in that situation because as I learned, I got to the hospital in what they call the golden hour. When you talk about time, there's an hour when you are when you, I guess your body starts having a stroke and you have an hours to supposed to get help. But be aware of yourself because it is a time thing.
Hmm. Absolutely. Thank you so very much, Ben, and thank you so very much. And if anyone has any questions or anything for Ben, we'll go on and put those in the chat. We'll address those at the very end of this. But thank you so very much for Ben. I appreciate that. And that
Very
kind of
welcome.
transitions us into the second thing that we're going to talk about this evening. And we're going to talk about lesser known stroke symptoms. So we just went through BEFAST, and BEFAST is crucial. And once again, we're going back through BEFAST, and B is stands for balance, I stands for eyes, F is facial drooping, A is arms, S is speech, and T, time to call now. And BEFAST is crucial, but it sometimes doesn't tell the entire story. Not everybody is textbook. Not everybody fits into just this BEFAST category. There's other stroke symptoms that often go ignored, and some of those are, I know Ben touched on those recently, about sudden confusion. All of a sudden, you're confused. I will say that's one of the things. Even after my stroke, I and I was able to start driving again. That was one, I mean, it was just really weird. I would find myself across the bridge in Indiana, but not remembering how I got there. And I would call and say, hey, can somebody help me get back over to Louisville? Because I don't know where I am. And like, it was just weird because these are roads that I drive all the time. But I might have been trying to go to one end of our town and I end up in a whole different state and I have no idea how I got there. And I add, and I mean, that it was so crazy. So, needless to say, sudden confusion, trouble walking or balancing. I still, to this day, personally, I have issues with my balance. I have issues with walking. Um, and I understand that, and I have things that I have in place now to purposely to help me with that. But also vision problems, like I know we discussed that in one or both eyes. Vision problems, that they come with the stroke also. And then something that, and I left this one for last, and a sudden intense headache. That is not something that is a BFAST symptom, but it is a little known symptom. And most of the individuals that I have talked to, they've all talked about having this headache that they just, that was there, that just came on, and they don't know exactly why or where it came from, but that is a symptom. Now, please don't mishear me say that every headache means that you are having a stroke. That is not the case. Please don't mishear me and say that. But I will tell you, our heads are not supposed to hurt. That I know that sounds crazy, but our heads are not supposed to hurt. When our heads are hurting, that's telling this your body trying to tell you that something's not right. So,
Mhm.
but I will tell you, be cautious of those headaches. Especially, I remember I had the night before I had a stroke. I had the absolute worst headache that I ever had. I just cannot put into words how it was. Just there was no medicine. There was nothing that could calm it down. So, women, and I will say especially Black women, we often experience nausea, fatigue, dizziness, and these signs they're easy to dismiss because I know as Black women, a lot of times that's what we do. We experience things and we keep going. We don't ever stop to think about, hey, what can this really mean? What is all this? What does this mean? Um, so that's why a lot of these symptoms are sneaky. And even when you experience some of these, I've seen a lot of times why so many strokes go undiagnosed. And a lot of people, when they get to the hospital, they're sent home because of their symptoms. And please understand that younger adults get strokes also. They have strokes also. When I was in the hospital, I was actually on the peds floor and I was just so amazed because on one half of my floor, there were stroke survivors who were under the age of 10. And so I
Mm.
said, I did not understand. I could still was confused about my own personal stroke because I thought that strokes were for persons who were 70 and above, and that you couldn't have a stroke under 70. But I suffered one when I was 35 years old, so I know for a fact. And I've met some survivors. There are some survivors that are part of the Stroke of Grace who are in their 20s. I think I've talked to one recently. She was 22. We had some in our 30s. Um, so that's why awareness is so important for everyone, not just someone who is older, but someone. It's for everyone. So, this is going to be interact. Like I said, this is going to be interactive. But drop drop something in the chat. Drop an emoji, whatever kind of emoji that you're thinking in the chat. If you've ever been brushed off. If you've ever brushed off your symptoms like dizziness or confusion or like a headache, if you just thought that, hey, it's just a headache, I'll just take some Tylenol and it'll be up. Just drop in the chat if you've ever, brushed those things off. And yes, and we're going to keep going. And this is good. This has been really good. So, I will tell you, we have another survivor that we're going to talk to, and her name is Robin Chism. And her journey, it highlights the importance of trusting your instincts and also advocating for your care. So, Robin, hey, how you doing? Robin, you're muted.
Okay, there we go.
Hey, how you doing?
Hey, I'm good. I'm good.
Good, 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 good. Thank you so very much for joining us. We appreciate that. So, just picking back off of Ben, I know we're talking about the understanding stroke warning signs, um,
Hmm.
but let's talk. I know you are a survivor, also a
Yes.
stroke survivor, and
Yes.
when did you experience your stroke? What was the date of your stroke?
Um, it was May of 2017. It was Derby Day. As a matter of fact, if anybody, most of y'all are from Louisville, y'all know what Kentucky Derby Day was, and it was Derby Day. I was actually getting ready for a barbecue. I was going to someone's Derby party, house party thing. And I was tired because the events of the week. I had, had a full-time job and also work in some Derby events. So I was a little fatigued and tired, but I didn't really pay much attention to that. Um, I was putting makeup on, and the more I put this makeup on, I started to see my face change, but I couldn't figure out. I was like, well, maybe I ain't doing something right here with this mascara. So I'm just going to keep putting it on and maybe it'll look a little better. And the more I did, started with my eye, and then my whole face started to droop. And I tried to call my husband to tell him I think something's wrong with my face. And he had meat on the grill. He was barbecuing so we could take the meat with us. And he was like, what's going on? I said, I thought I said something's wrong with my face, but apparently that's not what I said. He couldn't understand. So I remember him calling 911, and the lady asked him to do the things, what's her face doing? Can she speak? Blah, blah, blah. And he went to take my right hand and move it up, and it just fell. Like I couldn't keep my arm up. And all of a sudden, I had this intense headache. It just seemed like a lightning bolt went from the top of my head all the way to the bottom of my feet, and I just slumped over on the bed. The only thing I remember was the ambulance service coming and them telling me that not only was my blood pressure very, very high, but my glucose, my sugar, was it had to be over 600 because the machine only reads 600. It just kept saying too high to read. Nobody told me I was diabetic or had high blood pressure until I had a stroke. So both of those things were high with me. When I got to the hospital, I just kept hearing the same questions being asked over and over again. I thought I was trying to say, and I just couldn't, the words just weren't coming out correctly. I know that I was able, because of the time, because we caught quickly, I was able to get the TPA, which is that clot busting medication. And because I was within the 2 hour window, and that basically reverses your stroke symptoms. I only ended up in intensive care for 2 days. That was Saturday. By Monday afternoon, I was being sent home. Not that I was well, I just didn't need that level of care anymore because the time worked, the medicine worked. If you get there on time, they can treat you early and it does reverse the symptoms. So it was a longer recovery after that. But the hospital stay was short, which I was very grateful of. My job, I've always been in some kind of customer service position for the last 30 years or more. So I was just very stressed out about not being able to speak. Phone work is my job. If I can't talk, I can't make money. I can't support my household. What am I going to do? So that motivated me to work on speech and work on what caused the stroke in the first place, which was high blood pressure, high sugar level, doing the things that I needed to do. It took a very long time. I went from being on a walker to being on a cane to now nothing. So that's a blessing, but it took a very long time to do that. I started going back to work about 6 or 7 months after my stroke. And I was using a walker at work, but I was able to speak, and just advocating for yourself when you have to go back to work. Disability is not promised to everybody that has a stroke. They told me that I was not sick enough to get disability. They told me that I made too much money the year before, that I did not qualify. And all I could think about is, I got to get to work because this is not working for me. I have to make money. I have to support myself. I have to go back to doing what I know how to do. So that was my motivation, was that I couldn't live off nothing. Depression is real. That's the whole thing you think about. You don't think about how you're going to take care of yourself, but how you're going to maintain your bills and everything else. So you have to do what you have to do. I've learned that, yes, I still have residual effects. I have aphasia, so my smile is crooked. I have special things on my glasses. These are just for the computer to keep my eyes focused so that I can still work a computer in a customer service type job. I was blessed to be able to find a work from home position, so I don't have to worry about driving too much, because driving is the last thing they let you do. You do get confused. I was driving from the West End all the way to Preston Highway to work and couldn't remember how I got there. I could have got into millions of accidents. I couldn't tell you how I ended up at work most mornings. I would go to pick my husband up for work in the evenings and get on the wrong expressway and get lost. I have to have GPS for everything, so just because I will get turned around. So you're never ever the same. You never get, and that is a hard thing to come to grips with, what your new normal is. But I have just, a lot of it I used as motivation for my own self to say, I can do these things. It's just, I'm just going to have to do them differently. That's knowing what your benefits are. Ask questions. You have rights. You have FMLA, you have American with Disabilities, so you can get job accommodations. You can get extra breaks if you need them. You can get a certain chair if you need it. That is not DEI. That is all disability, and that's your right to be able to ask. And if they don't give it to you, then that's an issue. So make sure that you are advocating for yourself. Make sure that you don't let the doctors tell you, oh, well, I had one neurologist to tell me that I didn't have a stroke, that it was all mental. Well, migraine can mimic a stroke symptoms, or a panic attack can mimic a stroke symptom. So that may or may not be what you had. No, no, that's not the case. I know what I had. And if you thought that that's not what I had, why did I receive TPA? Because if you give somebody TPA and they didn't necessarily have a stroke, they can bleed out. That can kill you. So if you telling me that's not what I had, I want to know who gave me the medicine, because then that's a whole nother issue for me. I ask questions. I always ask the questions. It's your right to ask questions. It's your right to investigate. We as women do not ask all the questions. We just take what they tell us and take the medicine and do this and do that, and everything is going to be fine. It is your right to ask questions about your job. If you want to return, you can. You can do anything that you want to do. I know now what my new normal is. It's not always everything. I can't, I may not have a whole shoe collection. My other goal was to get my high heels back on, because I got a lot of them, and that's what I wanted to do. But I can't always balance in the high heels either. But I do try. I might pull them out every now and again, but then I take them off after 20 minutes and that's it. But I'm trying. Never let, Miss Kimberly's right. Never let the doctor tell you what you don't know. I still to this day advocate for myself. When my husband has an appointment, I go with him because he's on high blood pressure medicine. I go with him and I ask questions. We keep a log. We do things that is necessary to keep ourselves in relatively healthy spaces. Because what I don't want is, I was just celebrating my 50th birthday. I don't want to, that's young, to have a whole lot of issues if you don't have to. Yes, there's always stuff that we can change. I'm sitting here now. I've been sitting at my desk all day working, but I had a pack of Lay's potato chips next to my desk. I know I'm not supposed to have that or eat that, but you still have to try. And I try, and I'm better for it. And I just encourage anybody. The time thing was a big plus for my well-being, getting to the hospital on time and knowing what the signs are. I have the BEFAST on my refrigerator, and if I trip, and my granddaughter's here, she gonna look and read the things on the refrigerator and say, "Are you okay?" And she tests me, and see how I'm doing, if I'm okay. Can you see? Is your arm all right? Let me see you smile. You know, she does stuff like that um, as a kid, just so I'm not alone if this ever happens to me again. So it's important for everybody to have family support, to know that you can get back to some sort of normalcy. Just know what your normal is.
Mm-hmm. Robin, thank you so very much. You shared so much. Gosh, thank you so very much. I appreciate that, and I appreciate you, your willingness to share your story. Because I will say, sharing your story is not always easy. So you've done so. So thank you so very much. And I
Thank
will.
you. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
No problem. And before we move on to the next question, or to the next section, I do want to ask you one thing. What would you tell someone who really thinks that this is probably nothing? I can get over this. This dizziness, this everything that I'm going through is probably nothing. I'm just gonna leave it alone. What kind of advice would you tell someone, or would you give?
Don't just leave it alone. It may be nothing, but it may be everything. You never know. You never know. And at any age, I have children in my 30s, and I tell them all the time, you might think you're relatively healthy, but that don't mean, that you are. If something is going on with you, don't just take a Tylenol or take pain pills from somebody else because your back hurt. Don't do that. Advocate for yourself and seek assistance. It might be nothing, but it might be everything.
Right. And I'm glad you brought that up too. And I know we'll transition on and we'll talk more about this at a time. But now that you've suffered the stroke, strokes are hereditary, and our kids are 70% greater, have a greater chance of suffering a stroke just because one of their parents have done so. So,
Mhm.
that's for a whole nother day. That's not something we're talking about today. But I know since you just hit on that, that's very true. That's important. But
Mhm.
thank you so
Dr.
very much.
Christine.
Yeah, sure. Hmm.
I just wanted to, because I enjoyed Miss Robin. I think she was wonderful. And I just wanted to kind of make a little addition because when she was talking about her position when she had the stroke and of not getting on disability, at about 2018, I started working again. I mean, after I was, went through some therapy and things like that. But it is possible once you have a stroke that you can get back into the workforce. I've worked all the way. I just retired 2024. So, but it is possible. So you don't have to give all the way up if something like that happens. There are means and there are agencies that are that connected with people who do have strokes that put you in certain jobs or maybe
Mhm.
give you help in certain jobs. So there is information available just in case anybody ever needs to if they do have a stroke on the disability. If they do choose to file, because disability is not a lot of money. It's not a free ride. You know what I'm saying? It makes a big change in your life, and I wasn't used to that either. So but you can get back to your to a semblance of a good life along with working once you've had a stroke. So it's not the end. Just want to encourage everybody.
Yeah.
So,
Thanks, Ben. I appreciate that. Thank you so very much. As much as we can do to encourage people, that the greater. And I will say, we're running a little. I wanted to try to keep this to 60 minutes, but this has been good. So, but I will say, the third section we wanted to talk about was reducing your stroke risk, because the good news with all of this is that strokes are 80% preventable. And once again, these are the top risk factors. And I know Miss Robin, she talked and hit on some of these, but these are top risk factors that we can control. The first thing I always preach is know your numbers. We can control our high blood pressure. Track your blood pressure. And I will say, one of the things that I do is I take my blood pressure every morning. I do not walk out the door, out the house, without taking my blood pressure. I'm really, really serious about that. And then also, Ms. Robin, I know you hit on diabetes. Diabetes is something that we can control. High cholesterol, also smoking, and then something that we can control, believe it or not, is stress. those are things that can help to prevent prevent this stroke from happening. And those are some of the things that we can control. So I will say, like, as far as your blood pressure, and once again, I'm going to say this, I'm not a medical professional. So I always check with your physician, with your doctor of, what is the best number for you. But I will always say that any blood pressure that's over 130 over 80, you need to see about that. It's something that is not normal. So anything over 130 over 80, please see your physician. Once again, this is not medical advice. I'm not a medical doctor. So
That's a question of
yes.
either you or Miss Robin. Have you noticed lately that there has been a trend with doctors that blood pressures are becoming more, it used to be 120 over 70, I think. That was the number. And if it was anything over that, they jumped on it. But anymore, it seems like they're more tolerant of, or they're more accepting, you can have a blood pressure of 125 over 85. And they say, well, that's okay, you're fine. Is that, should we accept that, or
So the thing is that I will say this, and this is going to be a good segue because we got Miss Melissa Ellis that's going to jump in on this, and she actually is in the healthcare field. And I know she's not a medical doctor also, but I really feel as if the answer that I want to give on this call is that you just need to check with your doctor, whatever is best for you.
Mm-hmm.
Because 120 over 80 might be good for one person. 130 over 80 might be good for one person. 120 over 70 might be it all depends on the individual, and it's just best. I've seen so many different ranges and so many different people tell different things, but I always just say go back to your doctor and get that number from your doctor, because like I said, I am not a medical doctor. I don't prescribe any type of blood pressure medicines or anything like that. So I know, and I've seen that, and it's changed over the years recently. But I will say, once again, it's just always good to go through your doctor, go to your medical professor, and then our medical professional, excuse me. And then also, as far as diabetes, watch your sugar intake. Make sure you get your annual screenings. I know so many individuals, they say, oh, I'll reschedule that doctor. That doctor's appointment is not important. No, keep your appointments. Go to the doctor. Keep your appointments, because you just never know. And then your cholesterol. Eat less fried and processed food. Stay active as much as you can. That's been one of my biggest goals for this new year, is to stay active. And I will tell you, it has made my mental better. It's done so much for me to do that. But eating less fried and processed foods. And then also smoking. Now, I know it's hard. And I don't complain. I don't judge anyone if that's their choice. But I will say smoking triples your risk. Not just doubles your risk, but triples your risk for a stroke. So quitting smoking makes a huge, huge difference. And then also stress. Chronic stress increases inflammation, and then it also increases stroke risk. So prioritize rest. Whatever you do, cut it off. It'll be there tomorrow. You can pick it back up tomorrow. Make sure and rest. Also, if you need to, go to therapy. Therapy is healing. Don't try to carry this all on your own, because life is hard. And as we say, life be life. And life is hard.
Us as Black women, we always think that we have to do everything, and if everything is not done at the end of the day, we're going to think about it all night, and that means that we're not going to sleep, and we're not going to do this, and we're not going to do that. I was a big list maker, and if everything wasn't done on my list at the end of the day, that was the issue. The one thing that I've learned is that you don't have to do everything, and you don't have to be everything to everybody. It's okay to say no. No is a complete sentence.
Yes, absolutely.
Lower the stress. We have high stress jobs. We have families. We are 100% of everything to everybody. You can't. There's no way you can. And I learned that the hard way.
Yeah. Thank you so very much, Robin. I appreciate that. And then we're going to turn to our last stroke survivor, our last panelist, Miss Melissa Ellis. Hi, Miss Melissa. How you doing? Uh-oh, we can barely.
Hi, I had to unmute myself. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. How you doing?
I'm good. And I'm so
Good, good.
grateful to see all the other survivors here. I'm so grateful to see you, Dr. Christine.
Yeah,
Um, Brief introduction. So I'm in my truck right now because I just got off work, and it's raining, so I hope y'all don't hear that rain.
it's
But
okay.
my name is Melissa Ellis, and actually one of my jobs is an occupational therapy practitioner. And so I've taught dance for over 25 years and taught visual arts. What I would say is relatively healthy. I'd never smoked. Well, when I was 13, I smoked, but don't smoke, never use drugs, never drank alcohol. Like I said, reasonably, what you would consider to be reasonably healthy. Um, but I was working 65, 70 hours per week um, as an occupational therapy practitioner and a caregiver, and going to school full time at Simmons College of Kentucky for my bachelor's degree in with the Executive Leadership Academy program. So I had so much stress, and I thought I was managing it. And so I'm at the kitchen counter cutting up a pineapple, and I get so dizzy, I cannot see. I got a double vision. I got triple vision in both eyes. I could not see. I grabbed the counter, dropped the knife, dropped the pineapple. I grabbed the counter, and I'm just like, oh man, I'm so dizzy, I cannot see. Well, that subsided a bit. And I said, okay, I'm just going to go lay down because I'm so tired from working, from school, from homework. I just need to rest. So I walk the walls with my hand, how you walk with the walls because you cannot, my balance was so unsteady. My gait was so unsteady. I go to my bed, and my son was right in his bedroom, but I could not call out to him because I felt so dizzy and nauseous, dizzy and nauseous. I could not even yell for him to come and help me. Instead of walking my walls to his room, I walked to my bedroom because I just wanted to, I need a break. So I walked to my bed. I lay down in my bed. I get the worst headache at my occipital lobe, at the base of my spine, where your head connects with your spine, almost as if I was laying on a piece of metal. Like if you're laying on a piece of metal, like a crowbar, that's the best way I describe it, is if I'm laying on a crowbar across the back of my neck. It was a solid pain. And I am prone to migraines. I've always had migraines since a child. So I know migraines and I'm accustomed, but this was a different headache. It was at the base of my spine. It was the worst headache I've ever had. And I was like, oh man, like this is really bad. Well, I picked up my phone to call my son. I couldn't see the screen. It was giving me even worse headache to look at the screen. So I said, I need a nap. I put the phone back down. Only God sent my son to my room because when he's in his room, he's in his business. He don't bother with my business. He comes, knocks on my door, which the door was partially open. He said, Mom, hey, what are you doing? I said, honey, I have the worst headache. He said, well, what's wrong? I said, I don't know. He said, well, you need the blood pressure cuff? And I have low blood pressure. My blood pressure runs about 105/70. That's why it's important that piece of information Dr. Christine gave you guys about know your numbers and check with your doctor. There's no blood pressure that is, you know, for everyone. There's no number that's going to be suitable for everyone to say when you're having a problem. Mine usually runs 105/70, close to there, very low. So I said, yeah, get the blood pressure cuff because I have like 6 cuffs for my clients. So he put the blood pressure cuff. Again, I cannot see. He says, Mom, it's 145/120. I said, it's not possible. He says, no, Mom, that's what it says. I said, take it again. He takes it again, his mom, it's 145/125. I said, honey, are you reading it correctly? Like, I don't think so. He said, Mom, I'll check it again. His mom, 145 over 127. I said, oh boy, my blood pressure is never that high. So I said, okay, well, that's really bad. He says, okay, shouldn't we go to the doctor? I said, no, I need a nap. I really think I want to sleep. I feel horrible. I want to sleep. He said, well, Mom, if it was me, you would make me go to the hospital. And if it was me, you make me go to the doctor, right? And I said, oh, so now you're using my words against me? Like, trying to make a joke of it or whatever. But he was 100% correct. He said, Mom, so you don't think we should go to the hospital? So your own words are going to betray you? And I said, okay, so that's fine. Like, let's do 13 minutes. If I don't feel better, 13 minutes, we could go to the doctor. He said, no, Mom, not 13 minutes. No. Like, you're always the one telling everyone, go see about themselves. Go. And I said, okay. Let me just go. So he helped me put on my shoes and, get dressed. And he literally had to hold me walking down the hall. And I said, oh man, hang on. So as we walk into the car to go to the hospital, I said, I need to go to the restroom really quick. I go to the house, go to the restroom. I vomit so much. Like, I'm just vomiting. And I really hadn't eaten because I was cutting the pineapple up because I wanted to eat the pineapple. So I really hadn't eaten much that day to be vomiting. So when I start to vomit, I said, yeah, this is bad. I know this is bad. So he puts me in his car. We go to the West Louisville Norton, which had just been built maybe a month prior, maybe 2 months prior, brand new West Louisville Hospital, because that was faster than, so going back a bit, a bunch of people said, Melissa, you should have called 911. Well, I know I was going to be on hold with 911. And I knew how close the West Louisville Hospital is to my house, literally blocks away from my house. So he takes me to the West Louisville Hospital. We go and he walks me inside. I don't remember much immediately when we get inside, because I just started to decline. And so I do remember them asking me, I said, I think I need the stroke protocol. And they said, well, how would you know? I said, well, I'm an occupational therapy practitioner, and these are my symptoms. And I'm saying all this with a washcloth across my face, like I'm talking to them like this, because when I take the washcloth off my eyes, I'm so dizzy. It's unbelievable and so unbalanced. So I'm talking to them with the washcloth on my eyes. And like I tried to make light of it because otherwise I will cry. But and so I'm saying, yeah, I think I need the stroke protocol. So we go through the barrage of tests for the stroke protocol. And I think I'm good until I realize I don't have praxis. And praxis is your mind saying, okay, I'm going to reach up and hold this in your hand. Or your mind saying, okay, put it in the other hand, and you put it in the other hand. So praxis is your mind saying you're going to do something, and then you follow through, and neurologically you can do it. I realized I had the problem when I did not have praxis on my left side, because I'm touching my nose to an object in the stroke protocol. And with my left side, I'm trying to do it. And like, I got so angry because I'm saying, guys, stop joking around. Now is not the time for jokes and playing. And everybody's looking at me with a stern face, like, no one is joking around, because I'm honestly, earnestly trying to touch my nose to the object, and I cannot do it on my left side. And they weren't joking around, like they weren't intentionally misleading me. And I was like, okay, now I know we have a problem. So fast forward, I immediately get a CAT scan, and then I did not get an MRI. I did not get an MRI until I got to Norton Brownsboro, because they did not have the equipment at the West Louisville Norton. So we made the decision I must get the TNK, the tenecteplase, which is a genetically modified version of the alteplase. So it's a blood clot thinner and a clot buster. And so I immediately get one bolus of the tenecteplase, which is a one time, whereas the alteplase can sometimes be like IV over time. This is a one time bolus. And then I remember, like, I was kind of in and out a bit. And I remember the next discussion was, okay, are we going to air flight her? Or is she going to, go by ambulance? So I kind of woke back up and I'm like, wait, what? What are we saying about air flight? Who's getting air flight? So I ride in the ambulance to Norton Brownsboro, lights blaring, full sirens. And at that point is when I kind of start to get scared. And my son drove his vehicle out there, and somehow he beat the ambulance out to Norton Brownsboro from Norton, West Louisville. And it was, it got scary. But I was like, up until that point, I was like, I'm not afraid. Like, it'll be fine. But then when things started happening in that mode, I was like, okay, yeah, this is not great. So long story short of all of that, the TNK completely worked for me. The absolute best thing, I say this was the absolute best case scenario for me, was that I got the TNK. We reacted so fast. My son insisted that I react so fast to get to the hospital, get the stroke protocol, because I've had stroke patients. I've had 100 stroke patients. They're all in their 80s, 90s, 70s, older people that you assume a stroke is going to happen to someone who is, in the 60s, 70s, 80s. I turned 55, and then a week later, I had the stroke. And so, saying all that to say, we have to listen to our bodies. We have to listen to ourselves. We cannot take for granted it's just another migraine. We cannot take for granted that it's just another dizziness or, off balance, which is what my symptoms were. The immediate blurry vision, triple vision, dizziness, headache. Like, and for me, and then the high blood pressure. Like, for me, my blood pressure was high at 145 over 120, 125. And so, and I always tell people, you cannot tell by looking. Someone can look very healthy. Someone can look, very reasonable, and still we have to listen to what's happening inside our bodies. So I stayed in CCU, critical care unit, for 1 day. Then I was in ICU for 2 days. And then they wanted to do the step down to the regular floor. And I was like, I don't need step down. I want to go home. I'm ready to go home. I'm, a medical professional as well. I know how to take care of myself. I'm not going to do anything that is unsafe. And so I had to follow up with blood thinners, shots first, and then pills. So I had to follow up with blood thinners just, as a precaution. And so, like I tell everybody, we have to listen to ourselves. We have to listen to our bodies. You cannot tell by looking to think that someone is in really, really great shape, because inside all kinds of things could be going wrong. And we have to listen when they are. And stress is a killer. Like, stress is a killer, and we have to listen to ourselves. And back to Mr. Ben really quickly, I've seen you, I didn't know your name, but I've seen you in church 100 times, singing, worshiping, dancing. I never knew that you had suffered a stroke. So you cannot tell by looking at someone that something happened to them. And so I still say, I think I had the best case scenario. I immediately went back to work. So the stroke was December 3rd. In January,
December 3rd, which year?
December 3rd, 2024. Yes, ma'am. December 3rd, 2024. And so before New Year's, I was back to work. And I said, what am I doing? Like, this is insanity. Because, yeah, I need money. Yeah, I'm a single mom. Yeah, I have school bills at Simmons. I have, other responsibilities. I have home bills. I have all these bills. But you're going to kill yourself, literally kill yourself, to get that bag? And I was like, yeah. And my son even said, Mom, you're not going back to work, right? And I'm like, yeah, I have to go back to work. We need money. He's like, no, Mom, no. If you must go back to work, go, 10 hours a week or something. Don't go back full time. Mom, look what just happened. And I was like, you're right. But so that mindset of, we got to just keep grinding and keep getting it and keep trying to push forward to pay all these bills and, to pay the medical bill and pay. And I was like, now I have a medical bill. I have a medical bill. I pay it when I can pay it, as well as other bills. I pay them when I can pay them. But as far as killing ourselves, literally killing ourselves to work this many hours, work so hard, accomplish these goals. Yeah, I still have other goals I want. And so only by God's grace, I'm skipping around. I ended up graduating last week, May 10th, because I was in my final semester at Simmons College of Kentucky for my business degree. I was able to graduate only because of God's grace. May 10th, 2025, 2 weeks ago, a week and some ago. So I still got to graduate with a really good GPA. Kimberly, hi. Yeah, so, I still accomplished that goal, but was it worth all that stress? Definitely was not worth the stress of working 60, 70 hours a week and in school full time. We have to give ourselves some grace. We have to give ourselves time. We have to give ourselves grace. We have to listen to our bodies when they're telling you it's too much. It's too much, back off. So I don't know if I touched on everything that I wanted to touch on. Definitely we must work harder to eat healthy, eat more fruit and vegetables, work out more, keep our blood pressure low if, as we can, stop smoking if you can, alcohol, stop, reduce your alcohol, reduce your smoking, because those put us at a higher risk for strokes. And like we said, in the African-American community, some of us don't know the signs, and some of us know the signs and don't listen to the signs. So I know that I had the absolute best case scenario. I'm repeating myself now. I had the absolute best case scenario because immediately my son insisted, and I went to the hospital and got the TNK, the tenecteplase. So that's basically it. And this is my first time telling this story in a public forum. The only people that I told were Dr. Christine and Kimberly. We're gonna call her Dr. Kim now because she now has her PhD. Yay, Dr. Kim. So proud of you and so happy about that. But the only people that I told, like my son knew, my immediate family knew, and I told Dr. Christine and I told Dr. Kim when I was in the hospital, because I was like, oh my gosh, like Dr. Christine had a stroke. I need to connect with her because, one, I don't want her to feel by herself, but then two, I wanted to know that other people are experiencing this and taking steps and making moves based on your experience, so that others of us don't have to have, a traumatic response to a traumatic event. So I don't know. I wrote down a whole list of things I was going to say. I don't know where I put that newspaper somewhere. I don't know what I did with that. But if there's any questions, like I'm on my phone, so I couldn't get in the chat. But I think that's it. Like, if anybody has any questions for me, I'd be happy to answer them. But so one thing I thought about when y'all were talking was the residual effects. So I've been in Houston Intercontinental Airport 100 times because I used to live in Houston. And I went after this, I think it was February, I went in on a flight. I found myself in Houston Intercontinental Airport, and I'm saying, I don't know how to navigate this airport. Like, I was like, maybe they remodel it. I was like, yeah, they must have remodeled. And my son said, no, Mom, they didn't remodel. It's the same airport. And so I'm looking around like, yeah, I had a lot of confusion being in that airport, navigating, get to the other terminal, get to baggage claim. And so I do know that, like, processing, I have a couple things still happening with processing. There's still some aphasia, is word finding. There's still a little aphasia. It'll take me a moment to think, oh man, what word am I trying to say? Or what was I trying to, So there's still some processing things. It's been, 5 months now? December, January, February, March, April, May. See, it's been 5 months since that little stupid stroke. But so I do still have a couple of residual effects, but I say I'm fine. I say I had the best case scenario because of listening to myself, more so listening to my son, getting to the hospital, getting the TNK, I followed up with my own occupational therapy because I'm an occupational therapist. I did my own OT. I had a couple days of PT, and you know, just doing things that I know I would tell my clients to do. I would tell my patients to do these things, so I was doing them for myself. So if y'all have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. And I'm grateful for this forum. I didn't think I would ever tell people what happened because of the stigma associated with illness and injury and a diagnosis. But that's the way we help people sometimes. Like sometimes if people are listening, they'll take a piece of what we say and say, oh, thank you for sharing. You're awesome too, baby. Love you, Dr. Kim. And so I'll turn it back over to you, Dr. Christine.
So Melissa, first of all, thank you. Thank you. Your story, gosh. And I knew this was a thing. And I knew you were going to be that way. And I just want to say that the best is yet to come. This is only the beginning. This is not going to be the first nor the last time you share your story. And you're going to thousands of people. So just, yeah, just keep pushing. Every day is a different day. And every day brain has its own challenges, especially in the stroke journey, because we have regular challenges, then we have what we got to go through mentally with our stroke on top of that. And a lot of people can't understand that, but I truly understand that. And that's the reason why the Lord left us here is so therefore we can help someone else.
Mm-hmm.
I agree.
I
And
agree.
one more thing I'll say, there is a term there's a term called neuroplasticity. And neuroplasticity is the brain's ability to make new connections or new synapses, even after a traumatic brain event, even after a TBI, even after a stroke, even after anything that happens. Our brains, and it's just God, our brains scientifically create new connections. Like every new experience creates new connections. And so they say you cannot teach an old dog new tricks. You can. And I've seen that in my patients 1,000 times. Even if someone is older, even if someone's had a TBI, even if someone's had a stroke, your brain is still making new connections. It might take longer. It might take additional effort. It might take additional challenges, but your brain is still making new connections. And some days when I was at Simmons, like studying, sometimes I'd be crying over my homework saying, I thank God for neuroplasticity. So and that's no matter who you are. Neuroplasticity is in effect right now. So anyone who is a stroke survivor, anyone who is a traumatic brain injury survivor, yeah, like Dr. Christine just said, yeah, we're doing brain work daily, but also stroke brain work is a different kind of work. But your brain is your brain is making new connections. It is making the synapses are firing, and we can learn new things after a stroke. So I just want that, like, that's really important. No matter what your age, you can be 105 years old and still learn to speak a different language or to learn to use AI on your computer. Like people can learn. And that's really important. If nothing else, I want people to understand that everyone is experiencing neuroplasticity. Just keep challenging yourself and keep pushing. It might take more effort. It might take more energy. It might take additional study sessions, but we can still learn. So I'll give it back to you, Dr. Christine.
Yes, thank you so very much, Melissa. And it's interesting because you just closed this, because that's exactly what I was going to go through and say, because our brains, they do have the capacity to rewire itself.
Yep.
And so, even though we went through all these stroke warning signs and the different warning signs, what to look for, just always be encouraged that no matter what, strokes are 80% preventable. And you need to be educated. You need to remember the things that we talked about this evening. You need to remember BEFAST, the BEFAST acronym, and also community. It's so important to be in community with one another. Get in a community. You don't have to, it doesn't matter what you're going through. right now we're stroke survivors. So we're in community together because we're stroke survivors. And we're just trying to push each other to get through each and every day. But it's so important to join a community. And I will say one of the things that we have here in the Stroke of Grace, we have a community of survivors. We meet actually virtually as persons from all across the U.S. We meet on the second Saturday of every month at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So if you know someone who is a stroke survivor who might be down on themselves, who might need to, get a boost and they just need to be in community. If you're a caregiver of someone, please be sure to tune in to join us online for our virtual support group at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on the second Saturdays of every month. And always you can register for those meetings because they are private meetings. They're not things that we stream because we know that people are dealing with sensitive topics and sensitive things. So we want to make sure that everything is private and everything stays confidential also. So follow us on Instagram at A Stroke of Grace, and then also right here on YouTube at A Stroke of Grace to get more information about that also. So this has been a wonderful, wonderful discussion. Thank you, Kim. I'm sorry, I'm looking at Kim. Thank you, Melissa. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Robin. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
In here and for just being willingness to help someone else to share their story. So
thank you for what you do, Dr. Christine. Thank you very, very much for what you do and have done, because without you doing this, we wouldn't have the chance to do what we're doing. So thank you.
Thank you so very much. I do this because, hey, I want to be in community. I got to be, and that's the only way I'm able to survive. That's the only way I'm going to get through this, is by being in community. So be sure if you're watching this on YouTube, make sure to share the replay with someone because literally this might save someone's life. You just never know. These are not things that we ever expect to happen, but we never know. So we want to be prepared. So once again, I want to say thank you so very much to Melissa, Robin, and Ben. I appreciate you being open and sharing your stories with everyone. And until next time, I will say one thing. I'm sorry. There is a scripture, Hosea 4:6, and that is, my people are destroyed for the lack of knowledge. And that is so true. And I want to close out with that because we have to be knowledgeable. And that's what we did this evening. We did some educating this evening. So yes, thank you so very much. I appreciate that. And be sure to share the recording with everyone.